I'm Dr. Scott Lyons, and you're watching or listening to The Gently Used Human. Today, we are diving ankles, knees, and head deep into the wellness industry. Is it helping us? Is it harming us? Is it just tickling our wallets? And how do we discern the difference? I don't know about you, but I can't keep up with the Kardashians or the latest wellness trends. So I brought on my two good friends, Jason and Colleen Wachob, to help point us in the right direction, or at least have a good time trying. Colleen Wachob is co-founder and co-CEO at MindBodyGreen, the leading independent media brand dedicated to well-being with 15 million monthly unique visitors. She lives in Miami, Florida with her husband, MindBodyGreen founder and co-CEO, Jason Wachob, and their two girls, Ellie and Grace. She graduated from Stanford University with degrees in international relations and Spanish. She spent 10 years working at Fortune 500 companies, including Gap, Walmart, and Amazon, before devoting her life's work to MindBodyGreen. Colleen has been a speaker at Fortune 500 companies and numerous trade conferences on well-being trends. Her new passion that brings her joy? Pickleball. Jason Wachob is founder and co-CEO of MindBodyGreen. He is the co-host of the popular MindBodyGreen podcast and the best-selling author of Wealth: How I Learned to Build a Life, Not a Resume. He has been featured in New York Times, Entrepreneur, Forbes, Fast Company, Business Insider, and Vogue, and has a BA in history from Columbia University, where he played varsity basketball for 4 years. Let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Gently Used Human podcast. I'm so excited for my guests today. Jason and Colleen, welcome. They are the co-founders of MindBodyGreen, and I am so excited to be connecting with them today. Welcome, guys.
Well, so great to be with you, our new favorite friend in sunny Miami.
I am so excited to share a state with you. Now, let's jump in. MindBodyGreen, how long have both of you been doing conscious horticulture? And what type of strains do you primarily focus on in your garden?
So being that we have an indoor garden in our, we do have some plants in our rental condo. We focus on plants that are very difficult to kill. And require very little watering. So those are the types of plants we focus on in our
in your MindBodyGreen situation.
Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful. What led you guys to create MindBodyGreen? Because it's actually an amazing story.
So I've always been passionate about plants. I love the way they feel. No,
wait, do you like snake plants, or also known as mother-in-law's tongue? That's my favorite.
We do like snake plants. We don't have any here. We had a lot in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
They were great, like indoor plants for Brooklyn, but for Miami, we get
things don't grow in Miami.
Just a little bit of sun here. Yeah, really.
I don't know. Orchids
are beautiful too. So MindBodyGreen. So I think MindBodyGreen has been around for over 14 years, but I think that the why has changed. There's been various stages of MindBodyGreen and the mission and the why. And I think that the first why started with me and almost having back surgery. I played basketball at Columbia. I worked at Wall Street shortly after. That's what people did in 1998. If you didn't have the grades or aptitude to go on to medical school or law school, if you had no grades, you went to Wall Street. So that's what I did. Became a trader after 9/11. Like a lot of New Yorkers at the time, I was deeply affected by that event and just decided I wanted to do other things. And then led me down the entrepreneurial path, which was twisty and windy and had lots of failures and, one maybe minor success. And found myself part of a startup in 2008 that wasn't doing well. And I was flying all over the place. I flew over 100,000 miles domestic in 1 year. My 6'7" body.
What was your status?
I had all the status.
Oh my gosh.
In United. But again, in that process, there was a time when I'm like, I'm going to get the status and upgrades. And then halfway through, when I'm at mile 60,000, I'm like, why am I even competing in this race? I don't really want to win. This is what am I doing? And so, me in a coach seat, 6'7" body was just terrible and terrible for the person in front of me. And the stress of flying and the compression of the stress of the business and flying, the compression that happens during flying, and an old basketball injury combined for, good old fashioned L4, L5, S1 and the sciatic nerve. My right leg was like a lightning rod. I couldn't walk. Went to a doctor and he suggested cortisone shots and then possibly surgery. And I tried the shots. They didn't do anything. And then came back and he was like, you need surgery. I have nothing against surgery, but specifically with back surgery, the success rates aren't really that good. So I sought a second opinion. That doctor said the same thing. And it was like an afterthought. He's like, maybe some therapy or yoga could help. And Colleen and I were dating at the time, and Colleen had a yoga practice. So I said, all right, I'll try a little yoga, see what happens. So started with like 5 to 10 minutes of really light yoga in the morning and evening and started to feel better. And over the course of 6 months, I completely healed. And to this date, I've never had back surgery. And in that process, I kind of had this like awakening where it's like, wow, like health and fitness back then was very like vanity focused about like the abs and, and like looking great. And, I've always been somewhat fit. So like I look in the mirror, I'd be like, I'm okay. But like clearly I was falling apart, spiritually, emotionally, and, now physically. And anything back then was like, the word wellness was equated with the spa. Anything holistic was just like new agey, crazy, just like preach to the choir in, Venice, Brooklyn, Boulder. We all know the type, Scott. And I looked at this and I was like, wow, like I think we're thinking about this all wrong. And, it wasn't just yoga. I started to look at diet. I was a guy who consumed so much steak and so many martinis. My face is on the wall of the Palm Steakhouse in Midtown Manhattan next to Joe Namath and Adam Sandler.
That's you? I recognize you now. That's where I've known you from. Okay. The first time we met, I was like, where do I know this asshole? And it's from the steakhouse in New York.
Okay. Of course. Yeah, 50th between Broadway and 8th. There I am. You can see what I look like at age 27 or whatever it was. But at any rate, like changed my diet. I still eat meat, but, opt for, grass-fed or get better options. I'll leave it at that. And just like really went through this process where it's like everyone's thinking about this all wrong, that true well-being is this blend of mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, and environmental well-being. They're all connected. One word, MindBodyGreen. And that was sort of like the big aha moment where it was like, I think there's something here. And we officially launched, quote unquote, in 2009.
Wow. Now, did you launch it together at the same time? That was like a cohabitation.
This is a very stressful part in our. It started.
I'm a couples therapist, so let's talk about it. Like how?
Let's get into it. Yeah.
Where were you in 2010?
I know we needed you in 2010. In 2009, I was working nights and weekends with MindBodyGreen, and I had the very traditional corporate path. Jason always jokes, I missed exit on my tour of duty because I worked for Gap Inc. When we moved to New York, I worked for Walmart, and then I worked for Amazon. So I was very employable, and having a paycheck, having health insurance were kind of vital. But this was all literally happening as we were getting married. Wow. So yes, we did see couples therapy, and it was a huge part in terms of aligning on and bridging kind of our different thoughts on financial wellness, not just for our marriage of what does it mean when I say we'll make money in 3 months or 6 months, and then it extends to literally 4 years.
3 years.
3 years. Sorry, 3 years. But also, that those lessons have, managed and shaped how we run the company together so that we always are on the same page in terms of financial risk and investment. But the inflection point for me for when I joined full time was really when I had this breakdown moment, which is always a type that leads to, substantial change. I had a near catastrophic pulmonary embolism, and I had been leaving my Saturday yoga morning ritual class. It was a strong power class because that was the type of, exercise I did back in the day. I was walking around the West Village and I was like, Jason, like it's kind of hard to breathe. Like something's weird. Can you come meet me? We walked around and I was like, I think I just need to get home. So we took the A train home, and this particular station had very steep steps. And as we were walking up, I collapsed on the steps. Oh, got it out of the subway station, and we proceeded to call my general practitioner. But I then gaslit myself, my symptoms and everything that had happened, partially because it was a beautiful New York day and whoever wants to go to the ER, but really not realizing and processing the severity of what had just happened and chalked it up to dehydration. I spent the rest of the weekend napping, being lethargic, completely out of character. On Monday morning, Jason's like, the only way you get to go to work, because I was very disciplined about my work, was if you stop at your doctor on the way. So took the train to Soho, saw my GP. Within a couple of minutes, he's like, you're having a pulmonary embolism. And I was so bewildered. I didn't understand the concept. He writes me a note that says, I am having a pulmonary embolism. It was unclear if it was because he was concerned I wouldn't make it in the cab to the ER, or if once I got there, I wouldn't be able to articulate and he didn't want to waste any time once I got to the ER. But I had showers of clots in my lungs, showers of clots. And, that was the huge inflection point. And I always wish people can better listen to those whispers so that you don't have to have this cosmic kick in the butt. But when this happens to a healthy looking 32-year-old, you go through the battery of Western tests. And interestingly, I don't have high predispositions to clotting. Okay. I was on the birth control pill, which likely factored in, and had heard about the risks, but I think was like, oh, I'm not a smoker. I'm not overweight. That could never happen to me. And when I wrote about this story from MindBodyGreen, it ended up going viral. And I heard from hundreds of women who had cousins, sisters, friends, mothers who had this same experience, oftentimes being tragic. So, I am more thoughtful about what I'm putting into my body and aware of it. And it started this 6-month healing process because a pulmonary embolism recovery path is a true invisible illness. I looked healthy on the outside, but I could not breathe. And it was the first time that I thought about my breath, the thing we do 17 to 30,000 times a day, and really went on this discovery path, exploring Western, exploring Eastern. It was a game of Marco Polo in terms of what made me feel better, what made me feel closer to myself, to try to discover what was the path I needed to go on. And for me, the joy of well-being is very much the roadmap that I wished I had over a decade ago to really start thinking about, what would make me connect to myself and help me live a better, well-lived life.
Yeah. It's amazing how catastrophe so often leads to revelation. And I've shared with both you, or it's in my book as well, like, shit went bad and I couldn't change. I couldn't shift gears until I hit a rock bottom. And I hear that from both of your experience of rock bottoms might look different for all of us, but it's it takes such an intense experience so often, as opposed to, I guess I would turn it back to you. Why do you think it takes so many rock bottoms to make change in the world, to make change in our body, our mind, our spiritual attunement?
Well, I wish that wasn't the case. And when I look back on, my experience, while I don't have regrets, I wish I could have listened to the whispers in my body that something was off before it had to become such a slap to lead to that breakthrough moment. Because there was definitely whispers from my body, but I think the hardest part of all of this process is when you actually have to tune into yourself. And that's the work that only you can do. Yeah. We have, this wonderful orchestra of healers and Western practitioners and so many different resources. But at the end of the day, you still know your body best.
And I think to answer your question, I think about it two ways. One is, I think people know if they're not eating well. People know if they're not exercising enough. Yeah. And if they're not doing that, I also think there's a downstream effect where you're not necessarily in tune to those whispers. That's one of the reasons, I love yoga, I love meditation, mindfulness, but you just become a little bit more in tune. You joke, you don't see many people go to a yoga class and then hit McDonald's after or go first. It just doesn't generally happen. You become more in tune, what feels good, listen to your body. And so I think that, when we have a problem with people not eating well and being sedentary. And then two, to Colleen's point, I do think it's, it's easier to like, it's pretty straightforward with nutrition and exercise and mindfulness practice. Whereas when you're talking about emotional health, sometimes you're bringing up questions you may not want to answer.
Yeah.
And it's harder and it's subjective, and and there's like a lot of work involved. It's a lot easier. It's to some degree, it's a lot easier to say like, oh, we're going to change your diet and you're going to eat broccoli every day.
Here's your program.
Versus like, let's go to this place that you don't necessarily want to go to and talk about this relationship and the trauma and so forth. And I get it. So
yeah. I mean, it makes me really think about the process of what we override as a survival mechanism becomes the way it's so hard to hear those whispers. Like it makes us unattuned to being able to listen to the somatic symptoms, to the symptoms of our body. Even, we might hear it as anxiety, but actually anxiety is often like a signal, an alarm that's much louder to what's underneath it. Because anxiety is what's produced when we've ignored so many other things.
Yes.
That's such a great point. Yes.
So I am super excited about y'all's book. I read it in a day.
Wow.
And so it's called The Joy of Well-Being, a practical guide to a happy, healthy, and long life. And I lied. I'm actually a really slow reader, so I've only read the cover. But why joy? Like that word really stood out to me because like, why joy? Because like, doesn't well-being also come with like cold, shitty, miserable ice baths and raw, crusty kale?
This was a big inspiration for us. This point, in that there's a couple of sides to this. One is, if you take a step back, the conversation around longevity has just advanced by leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
Like it is amazing going back to 2009. And, we think like longevity was like 1.0, where it's like, all right, I'm going to live to 100. Then there's the 2.0, which is health span. You don't want to live to 100, but for the last 30 years of your life, you have terrible quality of life because you're not mobile, you're not healthy, you're bedridden. So health span's this idea if you want to be healthy and mobile and doing the things you want to do, for 99 years, 11 months, 30 days. Yeah. Maybe you die rapidly or pass away from a heart attack overnight. That's the idea of like health span. Yeah. When we like the 3.0 joy span,
the joy span.
This idea of what's the point of being healthy and fit and living to 100 if you're not having fun, if you don't have good relationships, if you're just miserable, and like we feel like we've come so far here, but the conversation in terms of like there's like the more masculine and feminine versions of this. The masculine side, it's about, and I wear some of the wearables. I like them, but it can go a little too far with like measuring VO2 max and lactate and like all these sorts of protocols and modalities. And you look at all these things, you're like, oh my God, like I don't have the time to do all of this. And like we're in this business, the time or the resources, and it doesn't seem like fun.
Yeah.
Cold plunge, for example, is something that has a lot of great science behind it in terms of hormesis and the longevity benefits. Colleen and I hate the cold, and we're like, we're not going to do this. Like, don't. And there's so many things you can do. It'd be one story if, you needed cold plunge was like, if you wanted to live past, 60, you had to do cold plunge. Like, okay, we got to do this thing. But like, there are lots of things you can do.
Yeah.
If you don't like this thing, don't do it. And it's this idea of there's a feeling that you need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And as a whole, we do believe people need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable because life is full of uncomfortable situations. But when it comes to health and wellness routines, I think people set themselves up for failing. National Quitters Day at the gym is January 13th because they put themselves in such uncomfortable. Yeah.
I celebrate it every
year. There's no joy. Like who wants to do this? Yeah. And so that's like the male point of view. And on the feminine side, I think there's like, this insane pressure that wellness is, looking like the Epsom salt baths and the candles and the gadgets. And it's just a little bit, it seems unattainable. I think it puts people in a position that's, someone, if you're an average person who has a family or works very hard, you look at this and you say, I can't even begin to think about how this incorporates into our life. So like, what's great about the science is we've come so far, and so much of the science points to practices, modalities that take very little time and are free and inexpensive. And the two biggest objections to our world is I don't have the time and I don't have the money.
Yeah.
And you can have fun too. I don't have to be miserable.
Oh my gosh. Really?
Yeah,
that is revolutionary.
It's possible.
I mean, I think, it's such a cultural thing to be like, to amplify everything. And it's like, I do feel like our wellness culture is mirroring this sort of urgency culture. It's like, we got to get everything in. You got to be healthy now. You got to do all these things. And there's a lot of pressure. And that pressure has an effect on our physiology too. And, thank you for saying that. I'm going to stop eating raw, crusty kale starting tomorrow.
Unless it brings you joy.
Like I remember going to, you've been in New York for a while. We went to Swen. Remember Swen? Suen?
Suen, yeah, the macrobiotic restaurant.
Old school.
I was just like, I can't do this.
This does not bring me joy.
It's not bringing me joy.
This is not, the mochi waffles that tasted like cardboard did not bring you joy?
Yeah. It's like, I can't do this.
That's sacrilege. No, because we were talking before, like I think we went to the same yoga studio at some point together in New York, and then
yes,
we flirted with every yoga studio.
Did you say you flirted with every yoga studio?
We'd go everywhere.
We'd go everywhere.
Yeah,
and there'd be a teacher in town, like it's like Sean Corr would come to town in Yoga Journal, like we do that.
Yeah,
like whoever was in town, we would go to their workshop. Like we spent a lot of time at Strala with Tara Stiles, but then like. Jiva Mukti, we would go to Vera with Elena, we would go to Kula.
Yeah.
We would like everywhere.
Yeah. And then you have to top it off with Suen, which is, in the cardboard waffles. I don't think they're there anymore. I actually like
I don't think so.
I used to bring my family there just to watch them suffer a little bit.
And it hence inspiration for the
It's true. But yeah, I really appreciate you sort of humanizing wellness in that way, because otherwise it's just the pressure is too much. And you're right. We end up buckling under that pressure of trying to be well.
Yeah.
Our friend JJ Virgin has this great line that you have to bake the cake before you can put on the frosting. Mm-hmm. And as we outline in the book, the fundamentals can be integrated into your life. Mm-hmm. All this other stuff, can be a little bit of noise. And if, there's stuff we engage with too that, brings us joy on that. But you have to start with the fundamentals before you can start tinkering.
And I think so much of the conversation is around the quote unquote 20%, the things that aren't foundational. And like we felt confident with the book, it's like we can get you to 80%. And that's like a pretty darn good baseline. Mm-hmm. And we think you can have a lot of fun along the way and integrate this into your life in a way that's like totally reasonable and actionable. And like all the other stuff, the stuff that we tend to talk about all the time online, that's more like the 20%, the frosting. Just focus on the cake. You just can't do the frosting and get all the things and take all the injectable, all the stuff. Like just focus on the 80% and you're going to be happier, and we're going to get you to a more sustainable place.
I appreciate that. It's like good enough well-being, totally. And which is like good enough parenting. Like let's de-shame the whole parenting cycle. Good enough, podcasting.
I'm like, we've got a crocodile in back of us. So
it's good enough artwork? Question mark?
We love the artwork. It is not as expensive artwork, but as new people to Miami, we saw this artwork and
brought us a lot of joy.
And have to admit, we are with our kids. We really liked Lyle Crocodile as a children's film. It's just a film for the whole family, Scott.
Yeah, it sounds like it. For those who are just listening, the painting looks to be a crocodile reaching. Thank you for moving so I could more articulate what it is. A crocodile reaching up to the oranges in the sky, not the sun, the actual navel oranges that are growing here in Florida. And it looks happy, that crocodile, because truly it just ate a dog from someone's yard and is now getting dessert. Or as we like to say, icing on the cake, as JJ likes to say. And by the way,
Exactly.
I usually just eat the icing. So JJ and I need to have a conversation here.
Totally. We can facilitate that.
I'm sure it'll go great. So I recently Googled, is MindBodyGreen a cult? And I fetched an article that was called Don't Fall Prey to the Cult of Wellness. And, I would love to dive into the cult of wellness with you both.
Yeah, we have a very complicated relationship with the word wellness.
Yeah.
I really struggle with it. And I look at the cacophony of voices on social media. I look at, the bro culture of cold baths and hyper discipline that we were talking about. And then on the flip side, I look at, what we call in the book Kardashian wellness for all the frosting and less of the fundamentals. And I really struggle with the word wellness, which is why we call this book The Joy of Well-Being. I want us to focus more of the concentration on the fundamentals, but also in a way that takes the conversation away from this narcissistic wellness conversation, which in some ways can be another proxy for vanity in some circles, not in all of them, but it's the more politically correct way of talking about certain parts of your body or nutrition or movement. And I struggle with that part of it, but yet also see how wonderful these foundational principles are. So I've moved to well-being, which also elevates the conversation. Yes, you do have to take care of yourself. And I, as a woman and a mom, always have to remind myself about, the great analogy on the airplane of you do have to put on your mask before you can help others. And then once you are in a good well-being equilibrium, then you can think about your family and your community and your planet. But it is so much bigger than just oneself, and which is why well-being really dives into this idea of something bigger and a word that resonates with me so much more personally than the cult of wellness.
And I do understand how things can be culty, in a sense that there are so many people who come to our world from, whether it's medical gaslighting or, there's something going on, autoimmune, they go to a doctor, they say you're crazy or back pain or something, and they're searching and they're in pain, and then they find something. Maybe it's a doctor who prescribes a certain diet that's restrictive, and all of a sudden all the symptoms go away and they feel great. And that becomes a big part of their identity and becomes ideology. And when someone challenges, and we see it all the time, and I also don't think this is unique to wellness. I think culturally this is what happens. And politics, we can go on and on this, but like when someone challenges that, it challenges their identity, and they'll do anything to defend who they are and their leader, so to speak. And the way to, if you're a leader and you're looking to build followers, so to speak, unfortunately, the best way to do that is to have an extraordinarily strong point of view that is probably extreme, that just you need to not deviate from that. And it always helps to have a common enemy and incite anger. A statistic I shared on our show with you, and I'll just repeat it here because it's just mind-blowing and just, is the Wharton study on the New York Times most emailed list, which is essentially the most widely read articles in the world. And so they did a study. They wanted to see if they could classify the articles by emotion, and they did. And the top 3 emotions were anxiety, awe, and anger. Number 1 was anger by 34%. If someone read an article and it caused them to be angry, that article is 34% more likely to go viral. Yeah. If you think about that, it's insane. Anger drives eyeballs, reads, watches, listens, clicks, revenue. So unfortunately, if you want to build a platform or spread the word, even if that's a good word, it kind of pays to incite anger. And that's, can get culty very quickly.
Yeah, and it used to be in a world in which maybe the comment section was only if you were reading, a digital publication. Now we literally live in a comment section. On social media, everyone's getting in. The barrier to entry is really low. And energetically, you have to be mindful about the consumption that is happening in that world.
We're all addicted to drama, Scott.
Someone should write a book about it.
I know.
Someone should.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're so right. I mean, anger is such a powerful force. So is fear. And we can couple that with anxiety. It will drive it drives the economy. It drives the way that capitalism is formed in terms of attention gathering and maintaining that attention to sell. I mean, and yeah, you're right. Anger is so powerful. It's probably why I wake up every morning and I ask myself, how can I piss people off today? Because I want to succeed. And I mean, jokes aside, like, it's true. No, that's not true. I don't wake up and ask that question until after breakfast. But it is true of like, how do you continue to operate? You know, we both are entrepreneurs. How do you operate in a world where that is the stakes? Like, you have to use the tools to essentially succeed. It's tricky.
There's a value system that is part of everything we do, while also acknowledging the world in which we live. And, MindBodyGreen is an ecosystem. People consume our content. And there is a need to be, quote unquote, punchy to get people's attention. But how do we do it in a way that aligns with our values? Yeah. And that's kind of the thought process, that we put our content through, channel agnostic, wherever it's going to show up. It doesn't mean we're not aware of, the bigger macro trends of there's an attention competition. If you can't just show up on TikTok with a 1,500, thoughtfully done article, you have to show up in the right way, but you have to be true to your values. And if you want to be an endearing brand, you can't fall, to these trends that go like this and change so dramatically, but staying true to your values while being aware of the platform is key.
And I think it mirrors what we're talking about here between well-being and what you're discerning as wellness too. And I want to go back to that for a moment. And what you were saying, it's like wellness has these very myopic views. It's intending to be unflexible as a means to gather a following, to gather an energy around it. And well-being has more this humanistic, spacious perspective that nuance is important, that you are an individual and that each person will have their own cocktail of processes and healing and nutrition and so forth to achieve this sense of well-being.
Absolutely. And this goes, when people say like, well, why do you write the book? Because we're a media company. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head of the why is the internet doesn't do nuance and balance well. Yeah. And we have we're very rigid about being flexible. And, that doesn't.
Do you mean mobile? Like when we went to Jivamukti together in yoga class? That type of flexible?
We're literally flexible.
I can literally touch my toes. You're welcome.
I can't anymore. Well, I can, but I have to bend my knees a little bit. Partly because I'm just scared of hurting my knees. But I think we do live in a world where if you want attention, you have to be really loud and extreme and outrageous. Who wants to just be scrolling and have it read something incredibly balanced and thoughtful?
I kind of do, but I also don't. But I don't. I hear you.
Right.
Yeah.
And, one of the examples we bring up in the book is the Mediterranean diet.
What's that?
Not really controversial. A lot of people would say, hey, Mediterranean diet, let's have olive oil. Let's have lots of fruits and vegetables, maybe a little bit of meat and fresh fish. Not a lot of controversy around it.
Sorry, that's so boring. I actually don't know what that is.
There you go. Exactly.
There you go.
Exactly.
But you've probably heard of some other ones.
I'm sure you've heard of carnivore and vegan and paleo, but not so much about the Mediterranean diet.
You're right.
It's not really sexy.
I can, as you say that, it's not sexy.
Nope. You can kind of eat everything.
Yeah.
And you have to make some choices with how much you enjoy.
Where do my patterns of shame and self-suffering come in if it's so flexible? That's no fun.
Exactly.
Typically enjoyed with friends and family. I mean, it gets even worse and worse. I know.
Yeah. I mean, so how do we switch from the, this very intense, closed, container of wellness to this more flexible, open, nuanced, trauma informed, to be honest, let's be real about that, wellness?
So, you want to go?
Yeah. Arthur Brooks has this great mantra about writing your personal mission statement. And I think it's really important to do that and take stock of where you are and where you want to go.
Yeah.
And, we shared a little bit about our personal stories at the beginning. 10 years ago, I was in healing mode. Now I'm a mom of 2. And what I'm thinking about is what I want to look like and feel like in my 70s, in my 80s, so I can be down there on the ground, in line at Disney World with my grandkids, and just having a really joyful life in my later years. So the why and the purpose evolves by decade, evolves by the years, but I think it's about understanding your value system of where you want to go. And then once you have an understanding of these foundational principles, really taking stock of what's the most important thing in your life to change? Because there's 8 pillars in this book. And if you're new to all of it, you're like, wow, that sounds like a lot. But how do you focus on what's going to have the most impact on your own health and happiness? And start there, because it's the easiest place to start. And really connecting, and this is something I've had to work on, over the years and kind of reset and recalibrate, is really understanding like what brings you joy. I have a really good sense of what my 3-year-old gives her a lot of joy, but how do we connect and make sure that that's still a through line of how we live our life? It should be a constant and shouldn't be just a childhood part of it. And then once you understand these principles, understand where you're at and where you want to go, then it's about developing your own roadmap to live your well-lived life.
Yeah. I want to take a moment to give a loud shout out to the Embody Lab, which is one of the most incredible resources for body-based and somatic therapies. This show is all about healing, and the Embody Lab does exactly that. Whether you're on your own journey of transformation and discovery, or enhancing your skill sets in your career as like a coach or a therapist, a body worker, or really any career where you are supporting other gently used humans, the Embody Lab is your place for deep, inspiring, and impactful workshops, certificates, masterclasses, and an incredible community of like-minded folks. I love the Embody Lab, and so do so many other people that call it a platform to come home to over and over again. The Embody Lab is giving my listeners an exclusive offer, a one-time 10% off code to enhance your embodied well-being. All you have to do is go to theembodylab.com and use the code GentlyUse10 at checkout. So I'd like to play a game with both of you now that I like to call Yay or Nay. And it's based on your core 8 principles from your book. So I'm going to name each core principle and share something from my own personal life that I want you to yay or nay if I'm on the road to joyful well-being. And maybe after I finish and you yay or nay me, you can share your favorite factoids from each of those core pillars. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Sounds great.
Okay. So let's start with the first core pillar, which is I will use my breath wisely. So sometimes when I'm craving attention, I'll go into my partner's bedroom while he's sleeping, and I'll lean into his ear and I'll just do this. I think they call that Ujjayi breath. So yay or nay?
That's like how our 6-year-old breathes. We're working on that.
We have a dental consultation right after this.
Unfortunately, nay.
Yeah, I'm going to give that a strong nay.
Okay. Well, here's another one. Sometimes I like to take a helium bloom into the shower, suck it dry, and just sing my heart out like near, far, wherever you are. I believe that the heart will go on. Once more, you open the door, and you're here in my heart, and my heart will go on and on. Yay or nay?
I'm like, we love Broadway, Scott. This is a strong yay.
Strong yay.
Strong yay. Okay. Awesome. Can you give us some more factoids about how I will use my breath wisely?
Well, have you ever tried that in a yoga class in the middle of class? I think that would be a very nuanced point of view on
the singing?
Yes.
Oh, no, that is how I used to teach yoga back in the day. It was called Beyonce yoga. We would just sing Beyonce and do downward dogs, upward dogs, and a few sun salutations in between.
So with breathing, one of the reasons why we started with this one, you come back to the major objections, time and money. Well, you're breathing all day, every day. You don't have a choice, and it doesn't cost anything. And in terms of frequency, we're breathing 17 to 30,000 times a day. Yet the majority of the population is doing it wrong, in that we're mouth breathers, and 90% of children have acquired like some degree of like deformed breathing in mouths and noses. And 45% of adults snore occasionally. Quarter of the population snores constantly. That segues to sleep and that discussion. But like more than half the population has dysfunctional breathing patterns. And so there's also like, there's a downstream effect. So it's not just like I should breathe through my nose because it's better for me. One, it filters out all the bad stuff, all the bacteria, the viruses, mouth breathing, it comes right in, go to your lungs. Nose actually filters that stuff out. So there's like there's an immune function there. Then it increases CO2 tolerance, increases your oxygen absorption and physiological resilience, become stronger. Nitric oxide, fantastic for your cardiovascular system. And then lastly, very relevant to this discussion, your book, and just generally, is you're more likely to be in fight or flight response mode when you're breathing through your mouth rather than your nose. And that could, when you're breathing through your mouth, it could lead to chronic stress. And just, we think about anxiety disorders, mental health epidemic, being able to nasal breathe is extraordinary. And if you can take it even like a little bit further when you incorporate, nasal breathing with other, techniques, if you think about it, we've got a problem with how we all interact with each other around topics that require, possible empathy, curiosity, and there's lots of divide around. And you've got stimulus and response. Like, and as humans, like we have that ability, like animals don't. So like there's stimulus and then there's the time in between the response. And when you breathe through your nose, when you start focusing on your breathing, look, it is still a work in progress for us and many people. You're better equipped to put more distance between stimulus, which in certain circumstances, something really angers you, and response. And I think it is safe to assume that the more time between those two, you are more likely to respond in a thoughtful, less reactive way, which is often beneficial for all parties.
Yeah. Should we go to the next pillar?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Super excited.
Super excited.
So I'm not going to quiz you on what the next pillar is because that would just be, rude. But the next pillar is I will aim for deeper, more restful sleep. So I personally like to sleep for the first 20 minutes of every hour. I'm like a super power napper. And, the total is like about 8 hours a day still, I think. Hold on. I don't know. Math is really hard for me, mostly because I'm so tired all the time. So yay or nay?
I'm going to give that a nay.
Nay. Okay. So I should not.
Although,
yeah.
naps are okay. Just
I
every
would say
hour.
without the comment of I'm tired all the time, I would maybe say it's working for you. If you said I'm not tired, I feel okay, I would say maybe that's working for you.
So that's
Way
a
to
more
pick up the
well-being
nuance.
approach to say, like, instead of like, you have to have 8 hours of sleep, and if you don't, you are a horrible human being, which is what my parents used to tell me growing up. Can you say more about your favorite factoids around
Well,
sleep?
I think that the hard line there is you never want to get less than 5. That's kind of when you start getting less than 5 hours of sleep, things can get really bad in terms of your well-being. And if I don't breathe for a couple of minutes or 10 minutes, like you're not gonna be around. With sleep too, if you don't sleep for a week, like you're probably on that same path. And so sleep is absolutely critical. And I think as a society, there is pressure to sleep, and sleep anxiety is real. And sleep anxiety can often be a lot worse than the sleep itself, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sleep is deeply personal to me. I ended up in an ER when I was in my early 20s because for 3 nights in a row, I couldn't sleep out of anxiety before a presentation, which had become something bigger in my mind. And there's a lot there that I can unpack with you later about my childhood and how this came to me.
He's not charging us right now, so maybe we should just
go into it.
That is how I make all my friendships. If we unpack our childhood stuff.
Yeah, clearly this thing had become something a lot bigger in my mind. And that was, they gave me a Xanax. This was, 2002.
Yeah.
And, the conversation kind of started and ended there from a medical profession. And now it's just become, I am a lifelong student of sleep. And it's not something that will ever probably just come super naturally to me, but I'm super thoughtful about my caffeine curfew. Jason can, pound espressos at like 3 p.m. and go to sleep. I'm cutting it off like before they recommend you do at 10:30, just because knowing my body, I'm really caffeine sensitive. And we try to do the things because we also enjoy them, like getting sunshine when you wake up. But we also have learned, again, bringing back the joy. We watch television in bed, which every sleep expert will tell you, no, your bed is a sanctuary. It's only for sleeping. But it brings us a lot of joy. And so at the end of the day,
we're mindful of what we consume.
We are mindful of what we consume.
What are you consuming? I assume you're watching Dexter again.
Totally.
Could never watch
Narcos. Yeah.
Narcos we could watch. Dexter, no.
No. We love Ted Lasso. We love a lot of the Netflix sports documentaries.
Succession.
Oh, so good.
Okay.
Although Succession does
that. So I track everything, and that show has an impact on me the next day.
Because we are
because you're tracking it on your ring.
So
and
I wear an Oura ring and a Whoop. And it's interesting
Whoop,
to see. Whoop.
What's a Whoop?
So Whoop is fantastic. And again, I have baked a cake, so sometimes there's frosting I like.
You're in the frosting. I eat frosting for breakfast. Let's be real.
I do like the Oura and the Whoop for different reasons. One is the Oura for tracking sleep, and the Whoop is great for tracking workouts and exertion and like real-time heart rate and also like real world stuff. So both are great to know if like an illness is coming on, like your body temperature will start to spike, and then like how calm you are. Like I look at my heart rate, and so for example, there was one time I had like an infection. I had to go to urgent care. And they take my blood pressure and it was high. And I'm like, oh, my blood pressure is not high. And I look at my heart rate. I'm like, oh, okay, give me a minute. Like, let me just do my nasal breathing and then boom, see my heart rate drop. Blood pressure is normal. Like I forget what they call it. It's like the white coat syndrome with blood pressure. Like it's so wildly inaccurate. Yeah. But like it's a great real-time tool for tracking heart rate, how hard I'm exerting myself. So I'll pause there. Succession affects me, but the writing is so good.
So good.
Going back for a second, not to Succession, because I've never seen it. But feel free to ruin it for me. I actually love when someone does that. But, here's an interesting question. Do you feel like all the watches, the rings that are telling you what your body is doing, how it's feeling, starts to distract you from doing that yourself? Like, does it take you away from that innate intelligence and wisdom that we're trying to cultivate?
Not only can it do that? But worse so, it can actually add to the sleep anxiety. So there's a study that found that clock monitoring, so rolling over, saying to yourself, why am I still awake at 12:38? Those with insomnia and will know when I'm talking about it, actually increases the pre-worry exacerbating sleep issues. So we have a very different relationship with sleep wearables.
And data.
And data in general. I've found really great treasure trove of insights in that upcoming, those first 2 weeks. I learned that there was an impact on alcohol on my ability to sleep soundly. Somehow I needed a tracker to tell me that, even though I'm sure there's a couple hundred MindBodyGreen articles on the topic. So you get that data.
How we drink earlier in the day.
I do. And
what time is it?
I will. That is, I don't drink a lot, but I would much rather have a margarita with lunch or brunch than have it we still eat dinner early, like 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, because it will impact my sleep less. So I am much more mindful around data and how I use it, because I know that I'm a little hardwired to take that and have it increase my anxiety or just feelings of worry. Whereas for Jason, it's fascinating.
Wow. I had to stop wearing my ring because I got divorced. And I also stopped wearing my ring that told me how well my sleep was, because I felt shamed in the morning. I was like, I feel just fine, thank you. 2 hours is enough for me. And it was like, you're going to die. And we decided to part ways. Both
usually when I have a bad night's sleep, I don't need a score to tell me that.
Yeah, and I think for wearables and data and testing and so much of what's available now, like, look, information is an empowerment, but only if it actually empowers you. Because I think for some people, and I think generally, like it's difficult to handle or interpret, and it could lead to more stress and anxiety, and that's a lot worse than wearing anything. So
yeah. I love that we're like basically neighbors, and we both have a big storm around us. I can hear yours. I can hear your thunder. It's just slightly off from my thunder.
Yeah.
But anyways, all right. Shall we move to the next pillar?
Sure.
Let's do it.
So I will eat real food. Now, I don't know about you, but I still crave from when I was a kid food from an easy bake oven. Yay or nay?
Well, I have no problem with the oven, but like, what goes in the easy bake oven?
I think it's Play-Doh. I don't actually.
I
don't actually remember, but I crave it.
I'm like, Play-Doh may have some gluten, otherwise it's okay.
Yeah, well, I have celiac, so that's probably why I'm craving it. That explain it. All right, how about this one? It's shake and bake, and I helped. Yay or nay?
I think it all depends on context.
Yeah.
If this is, like a family ritual that you and your family enjoy, and it's, a treat, then absolutely have that shake and bake and enjoy it.
But if it's you at 10 p.m., you already had dinner and you're feeling a little sad, and you go to the shake and bake drive-in, and then you start eating in the car, with like your hoodie over yourself, not as good.
Were you guys watching me last night? Back off. Back off. We're not that close yet. Damn, friends. Wow. Okay. I just got red on my podcast. Awkward.
Luckily, it's mostly audio.
All right. Does Ozempic count?
Ooh, that one, I think with that drug specifically, I'm still learning a lot about it. I think it can work for people who are struggling at a level that is like potentially catastrophic with diabetes and obesity.
Yeah.
And those people need help and sometimes need interventions that can help get them on their way. But what I've also seen culturally is a lot of people turning to Ozempic who, are looking to shed 10 to 20 pounds, and that's not the right fit. And what's interesting about pharmaceuticals in general and supplements, there's a camp of people who under no circumstances will ever take a pharmaceutical, and they think it's the devil. And there are some people who we'll take any pharmaceutical and like we'll refuse to exercise or like eat a vegetable. And therein lies there's the balance in between. Vegetables can save lives, and sometimes pharmaceuticals can save lives. And there's evil, and I'd say evil, but there are bad intentions in every corner of our world if you choose to find them.
Yeah, and algorithms reward having a very strong point of view on these cult-like topics that we were talking about. So, the nuance of the conversation gets lost in all the ways we consume media.
Yeah. I think when you start getting the conversation with children, I think that's a little bit more of a harder line where we're letting our children down.
You mean if we put them on Ozempic?
Yeah, like I think there's a discussion around like bariatric surgery and pharmaceuticals for kids like 10, 12 years old. And I think at that level, like, we're letting parents, institutions, the system in general have to take a hard look and say, what are we doing? Because at this age, this is, we're setting people up for a life of pharmaceuticals. And look, there are times for that, like in certain instances, but generally in this instance, no.
Well, I think it even goes back to your original story of like, you could have had this surgery and there are complications from surgery. Surgery is not just like a wham, bam, fix and done. You're cutting tissues, you're cutting fascia, you're cutting nerves, and there are complications. And, are there opportunities to, and the same is true for pharmaceuticals. It's not just like a wham, bam, it's all done. It has a full cascading effect that we can't always know in advance. And Colleen, your story is exactly that with the birth control.
Yeah. And it's like, look, our view is start with lifestyle. Yeah. We believe that lifestyle can go very far. So exhaust all lifestyle options before you have to turn to pharmaceuticals or surgery. And sometimes it is what it is and you can't.
Yeah.
But like start with lifestyle.
Yeah. Agreed. This show is also brought to you by the absolutely stunning and powerful tools of transformation that are created by Omala. Oof, even the name Omala transports you to a place of flow and vitality. These are some of my favorite products ever. They have an amazing color-changing yoga mat that responds to your temperature and presence and reflects back your posture in real time. There's this incredible smelling skin balm candle that heats up to activate all the essential oils and vitamins that your skin has been craving. I mean, look, if I could live in a giant bath of this candle, I would 100% do it. They also have these journals that lead you into profound insight, and then you get to plant those journals to create a stunning flower garden. What? I mean, if that's not deep and inventive, I don't know what is. If you're someone who desires to live a luxurious flow of life and who believes in transformative wellness, then you have to check out Omala. Omala is giving my listeners an exclusive discount to treat yourself to something that is as special as you, boo. All you have to do is go to omala.com, that's OMALA.com, and use the code DrScott10 at checkout. And a portion of every purchase goes to an incredible charity. You got this. So you name something in your book, and I have thought this for a really long time. And when I read it, or when someone told me it was in your book, because I only read the cover, I was super excited, and I'm hoping we can talk about it. And that is, bananas are controversial. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So I'm like, we could go deep on this one. So there are a couple of schools of thought on this. So one is bananas contain sugar. And I love that you're eating a banana right now on camera. And so if you are, and like in the wearable discussion, there are continuous glucose monitors, which again, like information is empowerment. If you think about diabetes and that crisis. And so being able to get an understanding of what foods can spike blood sugar is knowledge, and developing a baseline understanding of what my blood sugar is throughout the day is like empowerment. for many people, eating bananas will spike their glucose. And so the memo there could be, if you choose to, if your line of thinking is, I don't want to eat anything that spikes my glucose, then bananas are off the table. And bananas are kind of good. I would say there are other fruits that are lower, will trigger a lower glucose response, like blackberries. And so that's an example where there are some people who just say, like, no bananas, period. Bananas are off the table. And we don't necessarily believe in that. There are also some people who believe that, bananas reap havoc on, like, the, if you're sensitive to lectins and autoimmune, and who will rule out bananas. Our view on bananas and these, because this and foods in general that could be perceived as being controversial, because beans is another one.
Yeah.
This is where it comes back to, like,
are you talking about the magical fruit? Beans?
Like beans, yeah,
beans,
exactly.
Beans,
so for some people, that's off the table. And I think we've seen both sides of that one. There's a certain group of people eat beans all day, they're fine. There's some people of, like, people who struggle with autoimmune, for example, like, they don't do well on beans. It brings up a lot of, like, gastrointestinal issues for them, and totally get it. So this is what we're going to, like, come back to. You need to be the CEO of your own health, and you need to get an understanding of what feels good and how you feel after food. Because the reality is, nutrition, and we could talk about nutrition for, like, days and days, and just never end. We're all individuals, and there's really no one size fits all approach. So, like, get a baseline understanding of your lab work and what you're concerned in terms of family history and risk, and get those tests done, and see how certain foods impact that blood work, and see how you feel, and go from there. And I think where we land on this is food in general is, I think we can all agree that ultra processed foods are something we should generally avoid. Case in point, there was a study out of France that showed that an 10% increase in the consumption of highly processed foods led to a 14% increase of mortality. And that's bad news for the US, because 2/3 of all children eat highly processed foods. And so I think we do need to get off processed foods, but finding what works for you. We have some guidelines in the book. People have to do a little work. We're not just going to tell you, don't eat bananas and eat spinach all day and you'll be fine. Don't eat spinach all day because it's high in oxalates. For someone who's had a kidney stone, that's a watch out, I would say.
You're making me anxious. Should I eat the spinach? Should I not eat the spinach? Should I eat the banana?
Depends how much. Again, there's nuance here. Yeah. How many bananas are you eating, Scott? Are you eating 6 pounds of spinach a day? And I think this is where nuance and moderation and judgment.
Back off.
I know. Right?
That's true as well.
My spinach, my body.
There you go. That'd be a great T-shirt.
I already made it. We have a whole merch line for the Gently Used Human podcast.
I love it.
But like, you're bringing something up, which is, like, I have a friend who wrote a book called I don't remember what it was called, but it was like The Miracle of Kale, the superfood of kale. And then I've been on lots of podcasts where they were, like, shit talking kale. And then I'm like, I don't know. I love a little, leafy green, not the moldy, crunchy, gross kale, but, like, a deep fried kale. And we're talking about, like, extreme polarized views again, I imagine.
Yeah. And we have the same friend who I think
we do have the same friend.
He's a very balanced guy.
Yeah.
Very balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to your point, if you want to sell a book of nutrition, you have to have a really strong point of view.
Yeah.
And you got to have a common enemy. Got to eliminate something.
Yeah. And, there was an entire superfood industry that grew over the past 10 years. And a lot of, what we talk about in the book is really just Michael Pollan probably got it pretty right. Eat food, mostly plants, not too much. We've evolved that in 2023 with this entire protein conversation, which has probably been the biggest place where we personally have changed our lives and our own routines as it revolves around how we eat over the past decade.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think? Next pillar, folks?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Okay. This next one is I will move my body. So I'm wondering if you can give me pointers on my shimmy, shimmy, shimmy Beyonce drop. What
Does
do you
it
think?
bring you joy? Does it bring you
It
joy?
looks good.
It looks good.
It looks good. I mean, that's
Looks
my.
hot.
It looks hot. That's my first interest. Does it look hot? Then, yay or nay, does it bring me the joy of well-being?
Is that the only thing you're doing for your exercise?
Lately,
Well,
This goes back to the nuance.
we
'cause
always say start where you are.
start where you are.
So
which
if
is
that's where
shimmy,
you are,
shimmy,
it's a good
shimmy
enough start.
Beyonce drop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the best exercise is the one that you'll actually end up doing.
That
it
I
fits
actually
that
really
criteria.
appreciate that.
In terms of, look, one of the best exercises and the most underrated, quite simply, is walking.
Mm-hmm.
Walking is one of the best things you could possibly do.
Most underrated.
Most underrated. We are avid walkers. The other thing, there are a lot of people who emphasize cardio, specifically what they call zone 2 training, which what does zone 2 training mean? Essentially, that's getting your heart rate up to a place where you can have a conversation, but it's slightly difficult to hold. So how do you get there? You take the stairs.
Oh.
You don't have time to exercise or run? Take the stairs. It takes me less than 30 seconds to do 5 flights of stairs. I'm pretty good shape. If you're assuming you're mobile, of course.
Yeah.
If you're not in good shape, a minute, you have a minute. If you're going to a meeting, how long does it take to get in the elevator? People are pressing the buttons. Take the stairs.
Yeah.
And just build that into your day and try to walk.
Yeah.
As much as you can. Walking is going to get you very far. There are so many studies around the benefits of walking. There are ways you can do interval walking and pick up the pace, slow down the pace, call a friend. There's ways to get your heart rate up, and walking is just so underrated. I think we're too sedentary.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys know this about me, but when I was 18, I won Russell Simmons' dance contest at the Mall of America in Minnesota.
Talk about Russell Simmons,
but this did not come up.
Yeah.
Not Russell Simmons. Sorry. Jeans. Wait, who's dancing into the oldies?
Oh, not Dick Clark.
No. Who's dancing into the oldies? Sweat into the oldies.
I don't know what that is. What's
the whole movement craze? Oh my gosh. I'm going to Google it.
But wait, when did this happen?
Richard Simmons. We're going to do that one again. All right, we're going to take that again. I don't know if you guys know this about me, but when I was 18, I won Richard Simmons' dance contest.
That's huge.
That is huge. And it still is the highlight of my life.
Let's update his bio on MindBodyGreen.
Oh my gosh, would you please? Actually, my publicist took it out. I don't know why. But yeah, I mean, for those, sometimes I work out 8 days a week. Is that too much?
Well,
I think, again, it goes back to kind of where your goals are. And there's this statistic that I think we had both heard so many times that we were kind of immune to its impact, even though it was the single statistic that transformed the way we work out. Uh-huh. We put it on MindBodyGreen, again, having heard this so many times. And when you think about, kind of comments, people's minds were blown. Many of them mad at us for sharing it. I know, so much buildup. If you're over 65, there's a 25% chance that you'll fall. And if you do fall, studies show that your chances of falling again double. And if you fall and break your hip, then there is a 30 to 40% chance that you will die within a year. And it's not from the fall, it's from all the stuff that happens. Now, this single statistic moved me from a yoga, light Pilates. Obviously, there's a range of things that Pilates can entail these days, to working out with kettlebells for the first time. But it's mind-blowing when you hear it for the first time.
Yeah. And, for me, I'd always do a little bit of resistance training, but I stopped doing, I never liked doing legs. So the last time I did anything on my lower body was probably before the last game I played in college 25 years ago. And I got in the scale and I noticed I had lost about 7 or 8 pounds. I was like, whoa, I don't get it. Everything fits the same. And then I looked in the mirror and I was like, oh my God, I'm developing old white man's flat ass. My ass is disappearing. And we live in Miami, Scott.
I have a doctor for that, sweetie.
And so, I didn't want to go that direction. And look, it wasn't about the vanity. It was just like a wake up call. Like, shit, my legs are getting weaker. Like, I need to start doing leg work again, whether it's like body weight squats or just something, doing more stair work. And that was my wake up call because, segueing to like the resistance training and that scaring statistic about falling. So like, look, what happens? Like, you want to have balance. So maybe you don't lose your balance. So you fall. You want the mobility and the strength. So you're falling. Maybe you can like grab something and be strong enough so that you don't fall. Or lastly, have the lean muscle mass. So you have that armor to protect yourself. So if you do fall and, look, sarcopenia is very common, more common than you think. Yep. Up to 13% of people in their 60s are suffering from it. And if you live to your 80s, half of people living in their 80s have sarcopenia. And essentially, it's like you're losing bone density as we age, up to 1% a year after the age of 40. Yeah. And if unaddressed, it can lead to osteoporosis in men and women, and muscle strength and bone density are intimately connected. And so like for us, this is like a fundamental change of like, we need to focus on resistance training for like the concept of the longevity. And it's not just falling, to Colleen's point about intention, we've got little kids, like we want to be around when they have grandkids or they have kids, we have grandkids. We want to be strong enough where you can pick up like a 30 pounder, and hold the kid. Yeah. You need leg strength, you need mobility. So like, that's our why behind resistance training. That's our intention, to be around, but to be able to like hug and run around with our kids and grandkids.
Do you imagine like if we just started instigating like for 70-year-old or you said 65-year-olds plus 65 plus?
Yeah.
65 plus, like Aikido classes, parkour classes, like really the things that like teach you how to fall.
Yeah. And there's been such a wonderful shift in how people think of strength training.
Yeah.
One of the most popular classes on ClassPass last year for women was weightlifting.
Wow.
And I look at our daughter's school, you go by the gym in high school, you see women working out. One of our favorite things to do at night is when there's no one in our building's gym is to bring our girls with us to the gym so that they can see us working out. And, they do their, 3-year-old and 6-year-old equivalents of what working out means. But like just starting those habits young and having this just be how we live.
Yeah. We love that culturally there's been a shift where it's okay to be a woman and be strong and lift weights. And, and we're big fans of sports. We both played sports competitively in college and like have, for me, I always learned more through playing basketball than I did academically. I think the life lessons were paramount. We're just such huge believers, and it's a big why behind why we moved. And you think about women, women tear more ACLs than men.
Oh.
And it's because, it's not even close.
Do they have extra ACLs? Is that why?
No, they've got more ACLs. And it's because the belief is because leg strength. Men or boys, girls, are doing more, and women weren't in the gym, and now they're getting in the gym. So like, we're so glad that the conversation has shifted here to women, and that culturally it's becoming more accepted.
That's amazing. Next pillar, yays or nays?
Ready.
Okay. So the next pillar in your book is I will teach my body resilience to stress. So sometimes I like to sit in a cold Sometimes I like to sit in a cold plunge pool and just until all my good parts shrivel and my nipples invert. And then I invite Wim Hof to literally slap the shit out of me while I sing, "Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger." Yay or nay?
We'll still invoke, does this bring you joy? And if the answer is yes, I may have some more work to do. There's a second book for you, but probably not.
Okay,
probably not.
Okay, is it the inverted nipple part? Is it the Wim Hof part? Just so I can really narrow down my next day.
Singing is definitely the best part.
Singing brings joy.
Yeah,
me.
singing
Probably not to those who are listening, but that's another story.
I think
yeah, and we can take anything a little bit too far in life.
Can you?
And I know, shocking, shocking. And we felt, that in this chapter, there's a big discussion of cold plunge, and there's lots of excitement about it right now. Our social team will tell you if we post about cold plunges, it will get a lot of engagement, whether it's on Instagram or TikTok. So we felt, we couldn't ignore it, but we also wanted to acknowledge, like, here's a place where there's great science. And this is not something that we incorporate into any 1.0 or 2.0 version of our day. I'm not even, forget a cold plunge, I'm not even taking a cold shower. And, knowing that we run a company and are entrepreneurs, like that carries a pretty high stress level. And you add on, 2 kids who are 3 and 6, and just like the ups and downs of life, I'm not looking to add in more external stressors to my life because of where I'm at now. Now that there's someone else who could be on a different part of this journey and may be like, okay, I need to start challenging myself. That is not my place right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
We have built up that stress response.
You have built up that resilience and you're rocking it. All right. Next pillar. I will be regenerative. I will be regenerative. Am I missing the word A? I think I am. I will be a regenerative force in the world. So I'm happy to announce I started buying reusable batteries. Yay or nay?
Yay.
Yay.
Yay. Okay. What do you mean by regenerative force in the world?
I think it's reframing the conversation around climate change or sustainability or whatever you want to call it. This idea of like regeneration and being more mindful of our resources and what we do with them. And segueing to waste.
Yeah.
This idea that we need to become a little bit more circular without taking it too far and becoming an episode of Portlandia. And, in this conversation, look, it's an emotional conversation for a variety of reasons. And, there's a great environmentalist, Paul Hawken, who wrote a book, Drawdown, which we think is kind of like the best thing we've seen in terms of really like getting in the weeds and looking at the data, like, because you want impact here. There's, with this conversation, there are so many endless things that we can all do, but you want to have impact.
Yeah.
And so start with like your high leverage opportunities and focus on them, because it's very easy to go down the rabbit hole here. And, a big one that, like everyone eats, food waste is huge. A third of food grown is wasted each year, 1.3 billion tons. And clothing is another one. 80% of the material used to make clothing end up being incarcerated or sent to a landfill. So like these are like 2 easy takeaways that like aren't going to really impact people's lifestyle, and that if you're trying not to waste food. So like order less or eat more. Yeah. Be more mindful of how you're eating and waste. And then with like clothing, what's interesting when we were researching the book is fast fashion isn't really driven by lower income communities. Fast fashion is driven by people who have unlimited resources and chooses to buy a lot of stuff. So like with clothing, like, sure, be mindful about like where it's made, but like find clothes that like bring you joy and you like and are going to last you
more than a season.
Exactly. And so it's like a practical approach to a conversation, which many people will just say, it's never enough, or I'll just buy a Tesla and I'm good. And the reality is it's a little bit more complex. We want to give people a little bit focus here and feel like they actually can be part of the change.
Yeah. I think it's such a harder measure or driving force to change in that way. I mean, if we're not feeling well, we might be more likely to go, do some movement, or we might be more willing to change our diet, or we might be more willing to look at our stress patterns. But we might not intuit that, maybe my relationship with the world around me, the community around me, the natural world might actually be also contributing to some of the pain I'm experiencing. Or
100%.
If I'm not experiencing internal pain, I might not even look outside of me to address that.
Yes.
Shall we move to the second to last pillar?
You're getting to our 2 favorite pillars.
This is my favorite one.
And that's all the time we have today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. All right. So the second to last one, which are your two favorites, it's also one of mine. So I'm glad we share that. I will cultivate meaningful connection. Certainly, certainly as a therapist and doing research in belonging, this is a big one. So yay or nay? So the other day I met the cutest dog on my way to Whole Foods. And so I took it home with me. And now we cuddle all the time. Yay or nay?
As long as you didn't kidnap the dog.
As long as you didn't kidnap the dog. And pets do have a positive impact. So I would say yay. It would be better if that were a person.
Sorry, all I heard was yay. So I'm going with that.
All good.
All good.
It's true. I was recently doing an article with someone, and we were doing the research on the impact of animals and dogs, specifically dogs, and the significant effect on our well-being. Now, that's not anti-cats. It's just that the research was more lenient towards dogs creating more oxytocin, more of that bonding.
Dogs are like dogs are going to come over and lick you and hug you. Cats just kind of do their own thing.
I'm also allergic to cats, so
is Jason.
So am I.
Okay, so we share that. So tell us more about this as your favorite pillar and your favorite factoids of cultivating meaningful connection.
Yeah, so for this one, if you think about where we sit in the world today, we're in the midst of a loneliness epidemic. There's a mental health crisis, and there are numerous studies which cite all of the what can go wrong when people are lonely and disconnected. And one of them came out of BYU, where essentially equated loneliness with smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And if you zoom, and if you're socially isolated, you were 45% more likely to get sick with the common cold. And so you think about oh wow, what did we do the last couple of years? And in the context of the health and wellness conversation, it's very easy to go, okay, nutrition and exercise, and look, they're important. We should go there. But there was a study that Marta Zaraska cited, which we thought was fascinating, where essentially exercise lowered mortality risk by 20 to 40%, having good diet lowered mortality risk by 30%. But being in a good romantic relationship, having friends, and being connected to your community can lower your mortality by 45%. So essentially, connection trumps everything. And the study, which I absolutely love, which no one talks about, is the Rosetto study. And the Rosetto was a small town in Pennsylvania in the 1950s. And this is when heart disease arrives in America. And the rate of heart attacks for people over 65 was half that of the nation Rosetto. And for men under 55, no cases, heart disease non-existent. So they took a look, what's going on in Rosetto? What they're doing is magic. Well, they were smoking, they were drinking, they were eating lots of pasta and meatballs, probably bananas too. Yikes. And, they were this makes no sense. And when they took a closer look, they discovered that these people had such strong social connections. Multi-generational living was common. There were lots of parties and parades. People were enjoying wine and food with family and friends. And then that was the secret. And guess what? In the 1960s, community starts to break apart as people move away. Heart disease arrives and catches up with the national average. And so if you think about Rosetto, to me, it's just there's so much magic, although there's hard science behind the power of social connection. And given the state of the world right now, I just think this is such an important focus. And that's why it's, one of the pillars at the end of the book.
Yeah. And it's a place where I wish there was more of an outside amount of the conversation. You can take Rosetto and then transfer it, into the data of exercising more or less lowers your mortality risk by 20%. Nutrition, for all we talk about it, is 30%. But remarkably, being in a good relationship, having friends, being connected to your community lowers it by 45%.
Yeah. We have a t-shirt on our merch page that just says "Bring back Rosetto." Yeah.
You serious?
No. Not yet, but we will after this episode.
Yeah. But for a second, when I'm telling the story, you're nodding as if
I know the research. I too am a social scientist.
But it's such a great study.
It's such a great study. Which is, I was really excited that you brought it up. Really excited.
Thumbs up from me.
Yeah. All right. Shall we move to the last and final pillar, which is, I think, a really paramount one and actually tricky. And you write about how tricky it is, but so the final one is, I will seek my purpose. And, for me, I've been more practicing stalking my purpose. So yay or nay?
I think probably nay, but I
Nay.
appreciate the effort.
Yeah. I appreciate
I
you
think it's
appreciating my effort. That brings us back to the last
I
one about cultivating meaningful connection. Yeah. So tell us about purpose, because I think it's like this, like, ooh. I mean, when I
Yep.
read it, like on a like find your purpose, I kind of get this nauseous feeling all over my body.
Yeah, I fully relate to that. It's one of those super cringeworthy words. And we do want to reframe how we think about purpose, because I think, when I was struggling in my 20s with finding what my quote unquote purpose was, I was thinking, oh, it's my job. Finding a job that I can connect to my values is what I'm looking for. And as you go through the decades of life, purpose is going to change so much, from 20s to 30s, 40s, and in future generations. So being flexible with what that definition looks like. But there is great science that people between the ages of 65 and 92 who had clear goals lived longer and had a better quality of life than those who didn't. We mentioned earlier the great Arthur Brooks line about finding your personal mission statement. And it's about understanding like what moves you as a person, what gets you out of bed in the morning. Is it about achieving, or is it about finding and helping others? What parts of your life are devoted to caring for others? And it keeps on going back to, the original conversation that we had about wellness versus well-being. And how do we take this idea of purpose and, make it about something that's not achieving at work, being on the hedonic treadmill, but really making an impact that, helps your family, helps the world.
And it doesn't require, you need to quit your job tomorrow and go to Bali. Nothing against that. But,
see you there, buddy.
I know. And I think, a good question that anyone can start with, and one that resonates with us is, are you looking forward or are you looking backward to get like a sense of where you stand right now? And like to look forward or backward, like, there's a lot of little things that you can do to bring a little bit more purpose and joy to your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the, big inspiration points in this chapter was a fellow Miamier, Lisa Miller, PhD, and going back to our purpose and, what's our now, we think a lot about the mental health crisis as the parents of two girls. And she has helped show us that when mother and child were high in spirituality, the child was 80% protected against depression compared with mothers and children that weren't as high in spirituality. And, there's such a broad definition of what that looks like, and it really goes into this something bigger of a transcendent awareness. Sure, it could be organized religion if that's something you respond to. It could be nature. It could be caring for others. It could be going out in the woods,
Picking up trash.
But as parents trying to navigate, I think this really tricky, scary time to be parents where the data on children is scary. The data on girls is particularly scary. Like this is really top of mind. And the typical wellness kind of spirituality never connected with me. I wasn't like a crystals person. They look nice in my room, but it wasn't giving me this something bigger. And, Lisa's helped really frame how I think about this something bigger and this purpose in life in a way that's really applicable.
Yeah. Yeah. And the interesting research in like existential psychology and where it brings in more the spiritual lens and more like the holistic aspect of psychology as well demonstrates that spirituality is a sense of belonging to more than ourselves, more than just the interpersonal. I belong to this planet. I belong to a bigger purpose, something meaningful, and that gives me something to live for, to a sense of why I exist. And there's an existential stress that's reduced by it as well, let alone the hormonal, responses of simply feeling belonging.
Yes.
Yeah. So we made it through the 8 pillars, the yays or nays. I think I'm on the right path to the joy of well-being. Thank you for the advisement on that. One last question before we go. So I saw that one of your taglines for the book says longevity for the 99%. And I'm curious because as a 1%er, are you guys being exclusionary?
We're very exclusionary.
I love that.
We're going to get canceled by the 1%.
We're going to get canceled by the 1%.
I love that what you're talking about is accessible longevity, and that's such an important shift in the culture of biohacking and well-being and all of these things that are like they're really like for a certain economic class, which is not fair, and it creates more of a class system based on simply who gets to live the longest.
Yeah, and it's also, there's an interesting concept of, there's being financially wealthy, a financial billionaire, and then there's the concept of being a time billionaire. We have infinite time. I think, infinite time, there's just not enough time to do all of the quote unquote things, all of the frosting.
Yeah.
And there's an increasing feeling if you're not doing all those things, you're not good enough, or you look at all of the things and you say, there's no way I can possibly do this, and I'm never going to, get healthy. And we just fundamentally disagree with that. And that was, another one of our whys behind the book. Like there is we don't want to knock the longevity conversation because there's so much great stuff, but like what we did is took everything we knew, all of the experts, all the science, all the data, and packaged it in a way that, I can do this.
Yeah. I love that. And it not only brings joy, but hope towards well-being.
Yes.
And that's something I walked away from when I did read your book. I didn't want to admit it, but I did read it yesterday in its entirety. My friends who are listening, The Joy of Well-Being, a practical guide to a happy, healthy, and long life. Pick it up. It's a beautiful, accessible read that will change your life. Thank you so much, Jason and Colleen, for being on the Gently Used Human podcast. I adore you both, and I'll see you at brunch.
Amazing.
See you on the beach.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Gently Used Human podcast with Dr. Scott Lyons and friends. Visit gentlyused.com for fun extras, including submitting your questions for advice from a Midwestern mom. And don't forget to spill the tea and gossip about the show with all your friends and frenemies. And you know what? Show us some love by giving us 5 stars and leaving a review in your favorite apps. This helps us connect with all the other gently used humans out there. Oh, and by the way, you look fierce today.